since some of the hostages have been released, they've been, pressing hard to meet with Netanyahu's war cabinet. And Netanyahu finally agreed to meet with them yesterday, and it sounds like there were fireworks.
Yeah, let's put the first element up on the screen. I've actually, in my notes, bolded some of the key quotes from these meetings. This is an article that we're reading from the Times of Israel yesterday. Just the headline says so much. Chaos and yelling. Freed hostages, family members clash with Netanyahu in meeting. So a markedly tense meeting, the Times says, was held Tuesday between a group of recently released hostages as well as family members of those still in Gaza and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as well as other members of the war cabinet. Now, one interesting detail that the Times of Israel is reporting is Netanyahu showed up late for the meeting. So they were supposed to start at 3 p.m. and Netanyahu and people showed up at 3:45 p.m. And the quote is, "They let us get mad," from a source, "and fight amongst ourselves. I left in the middle. It's not acceptable." As Ryan said, they have been demanding this for a long time. This came on the heels of all of those demands. Some of the audio from the meeting leaked. Netanyahu could be heard telling the families, as the Times says, quote, "There's no possibility right now to bring everyone home. Can anyone really imagine that if that was an option, anyone would refuse it?" He also said that he said something to the extent of these are demands that even you wouldn't take. That's a Netanyahu. I'm paraphrasing him there, but he said, basically, even you, the people who are former hostages or whose family is still held hostage or recently released hostages, even you wouldn't take this deal. The numbers, by the way, of hostages are also, we're now, how many have been released? About 105, I think, have been released. 105 civilians released from Hamas captivity. That's 83 Israelis, 23 Thai nationals, and 1 Filipino. So they think right now about 138 hostages remain in Gaza, including around 20 women. One other statement I want to read before I get your thoughts on this, Ryan. This is from more of the leaked audio, and it was a recording actually aired by Channel 12. Quote, "I was there. I know how hard it is. It's hard in captivity every day. You don't know." She says, "You have no idea what you're doing there. And I know the conditions they're holding the men in are worse for the women." Another one went and talked about sexual abuse. And then another said, quote, "You have no idea what's even going on there at all. You claim that you have intelligence, but the fact is we were bombed." Hugely consequential meeting for Netanyahu, don't you think, Ryan?
Yeah, and I thought that in particular was quite striking. Because as the ceasefire went on, every day there would be a trickle of hostages released, and you can only imagine from the Israeli family's perspective how what that must be like. You're just holding your breath, hoping that in the next release will be some of your loved ones or all of your loved ones. And as a day goes by and your family members are not in that, then you're praying that the ceasefire goes so that there's another day. So this kind of cruel lottery can continue to unfold where you're hoping that hoping against hope that eventually that they'll be released. And those Israeli families are some of the people that I thought about first when Israel resumed the bombing, because that must have been just such a crushing blow, because that hope that the next day their family might come home is dashed by the resumption of the bombing and the end of these talks. And then to find out from these hostages that they were getting pounded by bombs the entire time, or a significant amount of the time as well, is that much more poignant. And one of the hostages told Netanyahu, "Hamas slept through your airstrikes."
Yes.
Like they kept us awake at night. They rattled us, but they just slept through it. They mean nothing to you, which gets in then to this question of negotiations. Netanyahu hasn't said what Hamas is demanding, in exchange for this. Hamas has floated, a permanent ceasefire in exchange for release of the hostages. I suspect that he's wrong and that the families would actually agree to that. What was your read on it?
Yeah, I mean, especially because the Biden administration is now pressuring Netanyahu reportedly, saying that their target for the end of the sort of assault on Gaza is the beginning of the new year. So that's a matter of weeks. And as these numbers show, there's still a lot of hostages in Gaza. So if Netanyahu's saying that his primary goal here is, to eradicate Hamas and get back all of these hostages, and Israeli media is blanketing the airwaves with these quotes and in leaked audio. I mean, something as visceral as the leaked audio of people being unhappy with Netanyahu, questioning the strategy of their own government. Again, it gets to something. This is a point I think is excellent that you make all of the time. It's actually criticism of Netanyahu and of the Israeli government is often much more pitched in Israel from either the right or from the left, then you're sort of allowed to operate within the kind of boundaries in the United States. And that's important for Netanyahu as, the U.S. If the U.S., we talked about this last week, President Biden, at least from his statements, says that he's been sort of taking public stances that allow him to negotiate with Netanyahu privately. So if he is trying to end the conflict earlier than the Israeli government would like to, and you have hostages questioning the strategy and that being blanketed on Israeli media, that's a huge, obviously a huge problem for Netanyahu, who is already under a huge amount of pressure to answer questions about how the security was breached on October 7th in the first place.
And he's cross-pressured, like you say, and there might be, apparently there is kind of more pressure coming from the wing of the Israeli public that wants vengeance. And Netanyahu seems to be just exploiting that anger in order to not save his political career, because he might be finished, but just extend it. He's just living to fight another day. He also, making this situation that much more bizarre, has these corruption charges hanging over his head, so that if and when he ever does leave office, he has to confront those corruption charges. And so he has this extra incentive to just do whatever he can, kind of take a step forward day by day. And the number one song, and this is just an indication into how much kind of thirst there is for vengeance right now among the Israeli public. The number one, have you seen this? The number one rap song is this like insane, like genocidal hip hop song that even by the end of the song is like calling for like Bella Hadid to get wiped out. It's like people can kind of Google it and find this song. I would you can find like a rough translation of it, but it's just wild, and it's a real window into kind of the politics on the ground and what Netanyahu was dealing with as the ceasefire was going on. If you remember, Ben Gvir, I believe Smotrich as well, were both hinting like if this war doesn't resume soon, that we're going to bring the government down. You had some of his right-wing cabinet members at the very beginning saying, we have to not, what did he say? We have to not consider overmuch the life of the hostages. We have to be very brutal in our calculations here. It's unfortunate, but we're just going to have to, they will also be kind of collateral damage in this bombing campaign against Hamas, which is now picked up with a renewed ferocity.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody would make the argument, of course, that Netanyahu was in some sort of like easy position either before October 7th or after, politically, practically. I mean, no matter what, it's a difficult situation, but nobody is happy with him, and for very good reasons.
Right.
He's basically lost public support, and that's in so many ways his own fault. And when you're losing public support, I mean, even the Israeli left was upset. Some parts of the Israeli left were upset with talk that there was going to be an indefinite ceasefire, and were interested in what Ben Gvir had been saying about bringing down the government, because they're so outraged by the way Netanyahu has handled the war and by how negotiations have gone. And public opinion is just so crucial. Public support in Israel and in the West is so crucial. And this is not helpful, obviously.
Right. And Netanyahu's been in power, basically since the 1990s with a couple of breaks. And he's been able to basically enact his idea about how to handle the occupation. And he has consistently said, I'm the guy who can prevent a Palestinian state from forming. And what I will do instead is divide the Palestinians, and I will manage the conflict. And we will kind of very slowly, de facto, and then eventually legally, well, quote unquote legally, annex more and more Palestinian land. And that you can do that and be secure at the same time. That was his promise to the Israeli public. He's had an opportunity to kind of enact that vision, and we've seen it blow up in his face, which is why you're seeing so much blowback from him, and now you're seeing so much of it kind of blowback at the Palestinian population. Should we talk about the way that it's kind of unfolding in the Western press with this kind of fascinating Jake Tapper interview?
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.